After a life-saving surgery, Mara Ellison hides her true identity behind a false name, only to find herself falling for the one woman who might see right through her. But can love survive the lies that started it? Pain is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as pressure, as discomfort you tell yourself will pass. Mara Ellison learned that lesson 3 days after her operation, lying alone in her flat with the curtains half drawn, the afternoon light resting gently on the wall as if nothing inside her was going wrong. She had been told recovery would be uncomfortable, tender, sore, exhausting. So when the ache began low in her abdomen, tight, insistent, unfamiliar, she ignored it. She lay still, breathing through it, fingers curled into the fabric of her sofa, reminding herself she had survived worse. By evening, the ache had sharpened into something else. It twisted. Mara sat up too fast, nausea rushing through her. Her skin felt clammy, her heartbeat oddly distant, as if it were happening to someone else. She pressed a hand to her stomach and felt a wave of fear so sudden it almost knocked the air from her lungs. This isn't right. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was shaking violently, pain spiraling in tight, merciless coils that stole her breath. The paramedic's voice sounded far away, asking questions she struggled to answer. Her vision blurred. The ceiling light streaked past as she was wheeled through hospital corridors she had left only days earlier, convinced she wouldn't be back so soon. Post-op complication, someone said. Blood pressure dropping. Get imaging, now. Mara closed her eyes. She woke to brightness. White lights overhead. The hum of machines. The familiar scent of antiseptic that made her stomach turn even before the pain returned in sharp pulses. A woman stood at the foot of the bed, studying a tablet, brow furrowed in concentration. She wore scrubs, her dark hair pulled back neatly, a few strands escaping near her temples. She looked calm in a way that felt deliberate, practiced. Controlled. Mara Ellison, the woman said, voice even but firm. Can you hear me? Mara nodded weakly. I'm Dr. Rowan Hale. I'm one of the surgeons on call tonight. The name meant nothing then. But the voice, steady, grounded, anchored her more than the morphine dripping into her veins. You have a twisted ovary, Rowan continued, stepping closer so Mara could see her clearly now. It likely happened as a complication from your previous surgery. It's painful, but we caught it in time. Mara swallowed. Is it bad? Rowan met her gaze, unflinching. It's serious. But we're going to fix it. There was no false comfort in her tone. No unnecessary softness. Just certainty. Do you consent to emergency surgery? Rowan asked. Mara hesitated, not because she didn't want it, but because fear had wrapped itself around her chest so tightly she could barely breathe. Rowan noticed. She rested a hand lightly on the bed rail, close enough that Mara could see it, steady, unshaking. I know you're scared, Rowan said quietly. But you're not alone in this. Something inside Mara cracked. She nodded. Yes. She woke to brightness. White lights overhead. The hum of machines. The familiar scent of antiseptic that made her stomach turn even before the pain returned in sharp pulses. A woman stood at the foot of the bed, studying a tablet, brow furrowed in concentration. She wore scrubs, her dark hair pulled back neatly, a few strands escaping near her temples. She looked calm in a way that felt deliberate, practiced. Controlled. Mara Ellison, the woman said. She wasn't looking at a chart this time. She was watching Mara's face, as if making sure she was truly awake. It went well, Rowan said as soon as Mara stirred. We untwisted the ovary and restored blood flow. You're stable. Relief flooded Mara so intensely it made her eyes burn. Thank you, she whispered. Rowan's expression softened, not dramatically, just enough to notice. You did great. Mara turned her head slightly, overwhelmed by exhaustion, by vulnerability, by the strange intimacy of being seen like this. What's your name again? Rowan asked gently, checking the monitors. Mara opened her mouth. And then, without planning it, without understanding why, the truth caught in her throat. She thought of how exposed she felt. How broken. How ashamed of needing help again so soon. How unbearable it felt to be this person right now, weak, dependent, frightened. "I'm Emily," she said. The lie slid out smoothly, shockingly easy. Rowan nodded, unaware of the fracture it caused. "All right, Emily," she said, typing it into the chart. "Get some rest. I'll check on you later." As Rowan stood to leave, Mara watched her go, heart pounding, not from pain this time, but from the knowledge that something irreversible had just begun. She closed her eyes, the weight of the false name settling over her like a second incision. And somewhere deep inside, beneath stitches and silence, a quiet truth waited to be exposed. Mara learned quickly that names had weight. They shaped the way people looked at you, the assumptions they carried into a room, the softness or distance in their voice. Lying in the hospital bed, tethered to machines she didn't understand and exhaustion she couldn't fight, she felt the false name settle into her bones like something she would have to carry carefully. Emily. Every time a nurse said it, she flinched, just slightly. Not enough for anyone to notice. Not enough to raise suspicion. But enough to remind her that she was drifting further away from herself with each passing hour. Recovery blurred together in fragments. Sleep came in shallow waves, interrupted by pain checks, vitals, the rustle of curtains. Her body felt foreign, heavy, stitched together by hands she couldn't quite remember but trusted nonetheless. Rowan Hale returned the next morning. Mara recognized her before she spoke, something in the way the air shifted when she entered the room, calm settling like a held breath finally released. Rowan stood just inside the doorway for a moment, scanning the monitors, absorbing the information silently before stepping closer. "How are we feeling today, Emily?" she asked. The name landed like a quiet blow. Mara forced herself to meet Rowan's eyes. They were darker in daylight, thoughtful, observant. Too perceptive. "Sore," she said honestly. "But, better." Rowan nodded, approving. "That's expected." "Pain levels?" "Manageable." "Good." Rowan's mouth curved slightly, not a smile, exactly, but something close. "You're tougher than you think." If you only knew, Mara thought. Rowan pulled a stool closer and sat, resting her forearms on her knees as she explained the surgery in careful detail. She spoke clearly, patiently, pausing often to make sure Mara understood. There was no rush in her movements, no sense that she had somewhere more important to be. "You were lucky," Rowan said again, though this time her voice carried something heavier. "Ovarian torsion can do real damage if it's not caught quickly." Mara swallowed. "Could I lose it?" Rowan's gaze held steady. "We saved it this time. We'll monitor closely. Your body has been through a lot." The "this time" echoed long after Rowan finished speaking. Rowan checked on her daily after that. Sometimes twice. Always professional. Always measured. And yet, there was a familiarity growing between them, something unspoken that lived in the pauses between questions, in the way Rowan remembered small details without checking the chart. "You don't like the apple juice," Rowan remarked one afternoon, swapping it for water without being asked. Mara blinked. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to." Rowan shrugged lightly. "You pushed it away yesterday too." Mara laughed softly before she could stop herself. It surprised them both. Rowan looked at her for a long moment, as if recalibrating something internally. "It's good to hear you laugh," she said quietly. The words warmed Mara in a way the hospital blankets never could. The lie became easier. Not because it felt right, but because Rowan never questioned it. Nurses came and went, charts updated, forms signed. Emily became a role Mara played instinctively, quieter, softer, easier to care for than the truth of herself. At night, when the ward fell silent, guilt crept in. She imagined Rowan discovering the truth, her disappointment, her distance, the careful withdrawal that would surely follow. It was easier to let Rowan know Emily. Easier to be loved as someone simpler. Because love, Mara suspected, was already forming. One evening, Rowan stayed later than usual. The sun had dipped low enough to cast amber light across the floor, shadows stretching lazily across the walls. Rowan stood near the window, arms crossed loosely, not looking at anything in particular. "Do you have someone at home?" Rowan asked suddenly. Mara's heart skipped. "What?" "Support," Rowan clarified, glancing back at her. "Family. Partner." The question felt dangerous. "No," Mara said after a pause. "It's just me." Rowan nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something she already knew. "Recovery can be harder alone." "I'm used to it." Rowan turned fully then, studying her with an intensity that made Mara's breath hitch. "You don't have to be," she said. The moment stretched, too intimate, too charged for a hospital room. Rowan broke it first, clearing her throat. "I should let you rest." As she moved toward the door, Mara spoke without thinking. "Dr. Hale?" Rowan stopped. "Yes?" "Thank you. For staying." Rowan's expression softened again, something unguarded slipping through. "You're welcome, Emily." The door closed quietly behind her. Mara lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling, heart aching with something dangerously close to hope. Because Emily was being cared for. And Mara was falling in love. By the fourth night, Mara could tell the difference between necessary pain and fear. The pain lived in her body, sharp when she moved too quickly, dull when she lay still too long. Fear lived somewhere higher, tighter, winding around her ribs whenever footsteps approached her room, and she hoped, shamefully, that they belonged to Rowan. She told herself it was gratitude. Relief. The residue of trauma. But gratitude didn't make her pulse quicken at the sound of a familiar voice in the corridor. Rowan arrived just after evening rounds, when the ward grew quieter and the lights dimmed to something gentler. She carried no tablet this time, no chart tucked under her arm. She paused at the door, as if checking herself before stepping inside. "Still awake?" she asked. Mara nodded. "I sleep too much during the day." Rowan smiled faintly. "That happens." She moved closer, pulling the chair from the corner and sitting the wrong way around, arms draped over the back, posture informal. It felt less like a consultation and more like a conversation neither of them had admitted they wanted. "How's the pain tonight?" Rowan asked. "Okay," Mara said. Then, after a second, "Better when you're here." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Rowan stilled. Mara's face flushed instantly. "I didn't mean." "I know," Rowan said gently. "You didn't mean anything by it." But she didn't move away. They talked. Not about surgery or recovery or blood flow or timelines. Rowan asked about books Mara loved, about places she missed, about the things that filled the space when she was alone too long. Mara answered carefully, reshaping memories so they fit Emily's silhouette. Each truth she shared felt like theft, of Rowan's trust, of her own identity, but the alternative felt unbearable. Rowan listened like it mattered. At one point, Mara caught Rowan watching her, not in the detached way doctors observed symptoms, but as if she were memorizing the curve of Mara's smile, the way her eyes softened when she spoke about music. "You don't look like someone who gives up easily," Rowan said quietly. Mara laughed softly. "You don't know me." Rowan tilted her head. "I'm starting to." The room felt smaller suddenly. Warmer. The hum of the machines faded into the background. Mara's heart pounded. It was Rowan who broke the moment again. She stood abruptly, rubbing a hand over the back of her neck. "I should go." Mara nodded, disappointment settling heavily in her chest. At the door, Rowan hesitated. "You know," she said, not turning around, "doctors aren't supposed to have favorites." Mara's breath caught. "Do you?" Rowan glanced back, eyes unreadable. I think I stayed too long tonight. Then she left. Mara lay awake afterward, replaying every word, every look, wondering when concern had turned into something else, and how much time she had before the lie she lived under collapsed completely. Rowan noticed it the next day. The way she lingered before entering the room. The way she checked the chart longer than necessary. The way she caught herself smiling before she could stop. She prided herself on discipline. On boundaries. On knowing where lines existed and never approaching them. But Emily made those lines blur. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask for anything inappropriate. She simply existed, open, honest in a way that made Rowan feel seen in a place she had carefully kept closed for years. And that terrified her. During a routine check, Rowan's hand brushed Mara's wrist while adjusting the four. The contact was accidental, fleeting, but neither of them moved. Rowan felt it immediately. The spark. The undeniable awareness. She withdrew first. I'll have you discharged soon, Rowan said, voice too brisk. Another day or two. Mara swallowed. Oh. Rowan looked at her then, really looked, and something in her expression softened, then hardened. For your own good, Rowan added quietly. Mara nodded, understanding more than Rowan knew. Because discharge meant distance. And distance might be the only thing standing between them and something neither of them could afford. When Rowan left, Mara pressed her face into the pillow, heart aching with the weight of what was coming. She had lied to survive. But she was falling in love in the wreckage of that lie. And soon, Emily would leave the hospital. While Mara would be left behind. The word discharge followed Mara through the day like a shadow. It appeared on the whiteboard at the foot of her bed, written neatly beneath her name, Emily Carter, as if it had always belonged there. Nurses mentioned it casually, voices bright with encouragement. Physical therapy arrived early. Medications were adjusted. Instructions stacked up in a tidy pile meant to prepare her for a return to normal life. Normal. Mara wasn't sure she remembered what that felt like anymore. Rowan avoided her until late afternoon. Mara noticed immediately, the absence louder than presence ever was. Each time the door opened and revealed someone else, disappointment flared sharp and unwelcome. She told herself it was for the best. Rowan was doing what she should have done days ago. And yet, when Rowan finally appeared, she looked different. Still composed, still professional, but there was a tension in her shoulders, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. She carried a folder this time, the edges bent from being held too tightly. Emily, Rowan said, stopping just inside the room. The name still hurt. You're medically cleared, Rowan continued, moving closer. If tonight goes well, you can go home tomorrow morning. Mara nodded. Okay. The silence that followed stretched thin. Rowan handed her the folder. Their fingers brushed, again accidental, again electric. Rowan pulled back too quickly. These are your discharge instructions, Rowan said, eyes fixed on the papers. Activity restrictions. Pain management. Follow-up schedule. Mara didn't open it. Will you be at the follow-up? She asked softly. Rowan hesitated just long enough for Mara to notice. I can arrange it. That wasn't an answer. Oh, Mara said. Rowan looked up then, something conflicted flickering behind her eyes. It might be better if one of my colleagues. I understand, Mara interrupted. She did. Too well. That evening, the ward grew quiet earlier than usual. Rain tapped gently against the window, streaking the glass with blurred reflections of the city lights beyond. Mara sat propped up in bed, staring at the folder on her lap, her thoughts heavy and tangled. She didn't hear Rowan enter. I was hoping you'd still be awake, Rowan said. Mara looked up, startled. I thought you'd gone. I tried to, Rowan admitted. She closed the door behind her. This time, she didn't sit. She stood at the foot of the bed, hands clasped tightly in front of her, as if bracing herself. I need to say something, Rowan said. Mara's heart began to race. Okay. Rowan exhaled slowly. I haven't handled this perfectly. That makes two of us, Mara said before she could stop herself. Rowan's gaze sharpened. What do you mean? Mara shook her head. Nothing. I'm sorry. Rowan studied her for a long moment, then looked away, jaw tightening. I should have kept more distance. I know that. Mara swallowed. You were kind. Rowan laughed quietly, without humor. That's the problem. The air between them felt charged, fragile. I won't be your doctor after tomorrow, Rowan continued. But that doesn't mean I can pretend I don't. She stopped. Mara held her breath. Rowan closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet resolve. I care about you. The words landed softly, and shattered something inside Mara all the same. Rowan, Mara whispered, the name slipping out for the first time. Rowan flinched, not at the familiarity, but at how much she wanted it. This can't go any further, Rowan said. Not like this. I know, Mara said. And she did. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. That night, Mara packed her few belongings slowly, folding hospital-issued clothes with unnecessary care. She paused over the discharge papers, her real name hidden beneath the lie that had carried her this far. She wondered what Rowan would do if she knew the truth. If she would feel betrayed. If she would feel foolish. If she would still look at Mara the way she had, like someone worth staying for. Mara closed the folder. Tomorrow, she would leave. And the lie would walk out with her. Leaving the hospital felt nothing like freedom. Mara stood just inside the revolving doors, her coat pulled tight around her, discharge papers tucked into her bag like something fragile that might break if she handled it too roughly. The morning air was sharp, winter bright, and carried the scent of rain on concrete. She had expected relief. Instead, there was only absence. Every step away from the building felt like an amputation, clean, necessary, and devastating all the same. She didn't look back. She wasn't sure she could survive seeing the windows where Rowan might be standing, watching her go. Home was quieter than she remembered. Her flat felt too large for one person recovering from surgery, too full of echoes that had nowhere to land. She moved carefully, following instructions, arranging pillows, setting timers for medication. Each small task felt deliberate, controlled, something she could manage. The nights were harder. Pain woke her in the early hours, sharp enough to steal her breath, but it was the loneliness that kept her awake long after the medication dulled the ache. She reached for her phone more than once, thumb hovering uselessly over a blank screen. She didn't have Rowan's number. Of course she didn't. Rowan returned to work the day after Mara's discharge with a sense of wrongness she couldn't shake. The ward felt unchanged, same rhythm, same urgency, but something vital had been removed. She found herself glancing toward a room that was no longer hers to check, listening for a voice that wouldn't be there. She told herself it was good. Necessary. Professional. And yet, when a junior doctor asked a question she'd answered 100 times before, Rowan snapped without meaning to. She apologized immediately, unsettled by how tightly wounded she felt. She avoided Mara's chart. Then she didn't. She reviewed the notes late that evening, alone in her office, reading details she already knew by heart. Emily Carter. Recovery uncomplicated. Follow-up recommended. Emily. The name still carried weight. Rowan leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. She had crossed an invisible line without ever stepping over it, had allowed herself to care in a way she hadn't since before her divorce, before she'd learned what it cost to let someone matter too much. She hadn't even kissed her. And still, the loss felt intimate. Days passed. Mara's body healed slowly, unevenly. Some mornings she woke hopeful, energized by the simple act of being alive. Other days she moved through the flat like a ghost, everything reminding her of what she hadn't said. She caught herself rehearsing confessions in the shower. My name is Mara. I lied because I was scared. I didn't think you'd look at me if you knew who I really was. None of them sounded strong enough. When the follow-up appointment notice arrived in the post, her heart lurched painfully. The appointment wasn't with Rowan. She told herself that was for the best. She cried anyway. Rowan tried dating. It was a mistake. She sat across from a woman named Claire in a softly lit restaurant, nodding at the right moments, smiling when expected. Claire was kind, attractive, interested. Under different circumstances, Rowan might have let it go somewhere. But every laugh felt forced. Every touch felt wrong. You seem distracted, Claire said gently. Rowan hesitated, then offered the safest truth she had. I met someone at work. Claire smiled knowingly. That'll do it. Rowan didn't correct her. The first real crack in the distance came on a Tuesday afternoon. Mara's pain spiked suddenly, sharp, terrifying, familiar. She froze on the kitchen floor, panic clawing at her chest as memories of that night rushed back. She didn't call an ambulance. She didn't call a friend. She grabbed her phone and dialed the hospital. General surgery, the receptionist answered. Mara's voice shook. I was recently discharged. I had ovarian torsion. A pause. Keys clicking. Name? Mara hesitated. Emily, she said quietly. The lie still opened doors. Rowan heard her voice before she heard her name. The nurse's head appeared in the doorway. Dr. Hale? There's a former patient on the line. She's asking for advice. Rowan's heart jumped. Name? Emily Carter. Rowan stood so fast her chair scraped loudly across the floor. Put her through, she said. When Mara heard Rowan's voice on the line, calm and familiar, she broke. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know who else to call. Rowan closed her eyes briefly. It's okay. Talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. The space between leaving and staying collapsed in that moment. Because no matter how far apart they were, they still reached for each other. Rowan listened without interrupting. She could hear it in Mara's breathing, the way it hitched between words, the way fear crept into the pauses. This wasn't dramatic pain, not the kind that announced itself loudly. It was the kind Rowan had learned to respect most. On a scale of 1 to 10? Rowan asked calmly. 7, Mara said. Maybe 8. Any nausea? Yes. Fever? I don't think so. Rowan made a decision before she finished asking questions. I want you back here, she said. Tonight. Mara's chest tightened. I don't want to be dramatic. You're not, Rowan replied, voice firm. You're being cautious. That's different. There was relief in being told what to do, relief sharp enough it almost hurt. Okay, Mara whispered. I'll let the team know, Rowan continued. When you arrive, tell them you spoke to me. Mara hesitated. Will you be there? A beat. Yes, Rowan said. I will. The hospital looked different at night. Mara noticed it immediately as she was wheeled through the corridors again, quieter, shadows stretching longer, voices lower and more urgent all at once. Her body remembered this place too well. Every turn tightened her stomach with dread. When Rowan appeared beside her bed, something inside Mara finally unclenched. Rowan wasn't wearing scrubs this time. She had changed into a white coat hastily pulled on over dark clothes, hair less controlled than usual. She looked human. Tired. Worried. Hi, Rowan said softly. Hi, Mara answered. They stared at each other for a fraction of a second too long. Rowan recovered first. We'll get imaging done. I just want to be sure everything's okay. Thank you, Mara said. Rowan nodded, but didn't move away. You did the right thing, calling. Mara swallowed. I only remembered your voice. Rowan's expression softened, then tightened, as if she wished she hadn't heard that. Tests followed. Scans. Waiting. Mara lay still, listening to the distant sounds of the hospital at night. Rowan checked in often, too often to be coincidence. Each time she came back, relief washed over Mara anew, tangled with guilt. Because Rowan was still calling her Emily. And every time she answered to it, something inside her twisted harder than her ovary ever had. Finally, Rowan returned with the results. No torsion, she said. Inflammation. Painful, but manageable. Mara exhaled shakily. So I'm not. No, Rowan said quickly. You're not back where you were. They stood there, the crisis easing, leaving behind what neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Rowan cleared her throat. You should stay overnight for observation. Mara nodded. Okay. Rowan hesitated, then added quietly, I'll be nearby. The night stretched long. At some point, Mara woke to find Rowan sitting in the chair beside her bed, head bowed slightly, reading something on her phone. She hadn't heard her come in. You didn't have to stay, Mara murmured. Rowan looked up, startled. I wanted to. Silence settled between them, thick, fragile. Mara, Rowan said suddenly. Mara froze. Yes? Rowan frowned slightly, as if testing the name in her mouth. I thought I heard the nurse say something earlier. Your name sounded different. Mara's heart began to pound. She stopped. Tried again. Emily is what people call me. Rowan studied her, eyes sharp now. Too sharp. That's not an answer, Rowan said gently. Mara looked away, tears burning. I didn't lie to hurt you. Rowan's chest rose and fell slowly. Then why? Mara closed her eyes. Because I didn't think you'd stay, she whispered. Not for me. The truth hovered between them, trembling. Rowan stood slowly, crossing the short distance to the bed. She didn't touch Mara, but she was close enough that Mara could feel the warmth of her. You don't get to decide who I care about, Rowan said quietly. Mara's breath hitched. I know. Tell me your real name. Mara opened her eyes. Mara, she said. It's Mara Ellison. Rowan repeated it softly, like something sacred. Mara. The lie finally broke. And somehow, despite everything, Rowan was still there. Rowan didn't sit back down. She stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded loosely, gaze fixed on Mara as if seeing her clearly for the first time, and realizing how much she had missed by not knowing her name. Mara, Rowan said again. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't angry. It was careful. Mara nodded, throat tight. I'm sorry. Rowan exhaled slowly. I believe you. The word surprised them both. But, Rowan added, quieter now, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Mara swallowed. I know. Silence filled the room, heavier than before. The machines hummed steadily, indifferent to the emotional reckoning unfolding beside them. I crossed lines, Rowan said finally. Even before tonight. I should have realized something was off. I should have asked more questions. You were kind, Mara said quickly. That's not crossing a line. Rowan's mouth curved faintly, sad and self-aware. It can be. In the wrong context. She pulled the chair back and sat, this time deliberately placing space between them, not distance, but intention. I need to be clear, Rowan continued. I can't be involved in your care anymore. Not after this. Mara's heart sank. Because I lied? Because I care, Rowan replied. The honesty landed harder than any reprimand could have. Morning arrived slowly. Gray light filtered through the blinds, bringing with it the shift change, the return of routine. Rowan briefed another consultant thoroughly, professionally, handing over Mara's care with a steadiness that felt earned rather than cold. She didn't leave afterward. Instead, she waited until Mara was cleared to go home again, standing awkwardly by the door as if unsure whether she was allowed to stay. "This is where I stop being your doctor," Rowan said. Mara nodded. "I understand." Rowan hesitated. "And this is where I need to ask you something, not as your surgeon." Mara's breath caught. "Okay. Would you be open to talking again?" Rowan said carefully, "after some time has passed? With no charts. No white coats. No lies." Tears welled in Mara's eyes. "Yes." Rowan's shoulders relaxed visibly, as if she'd been holding herself rigid for days. "Good." They shared a quiet smile, tentative, fragile, but real. Weeks passed. Recovery continued. Slowly. Unevenly. Mara learned to live again without the hospital's rhythm guiding her days. She walked more. Cooked again. Let herself feel hopeful without punishing herself for it. She didn't hear from Rowan. She told herself that was part of the price of honesty. Then one evening, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Rowan." "Hi. It's Rowan Hale. I wanted to check in, only if that's okay." Mara stared at the screen, heart pounding. "Mara. It's okay." A pause. "Rowan. I'm glad." They didn't rush. Messages stayed light at first, how recovery was going, whether the pain had eased, whether Mara had gone back to work yet. Rowan never offered medical advice. Mara never asked. Boundaries, carefully rebuilt. But beneath the surface, something deeper waited. They met for coffee a month later. No hospital. No fluorescent lights. Just a small cafe near the river, quiet and unassuming. Rowan arrived first. When Mara walked in, Rowan stood instinctively, eyes lighting in a way that erased any lingering doubt. "This is different," Rowan said softly, sitting back down. Mara smiled nervously. "Better?" Rowan nodded. "Much." They talked for hours. Not about illness. Not about lies. About who they were, separate from the crisis that had brought them together. When they finally stood to leave, the moment hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Rowan hesitated. "May I?" Mara nodded. Rowan's hand brushed Mara's, not accidental this time. Intentional. Gentle. The truth hadn't driven them apart. It had made space for something real. Love did not arrive with fireworks. It came slowly, almost invisibly, like muscle memory returning after injury, subtle, cautious, earned. Mara and Rowan didn't name what they were doing at first. They met for walks along the river, for coffee that stretched into late lunches, for conversations that drifted easily between laughter and long, thoughtful silences. There were no expectations spoken aloud, no promises exchanged in the beginning. Only presence. Rowan was different outside the hospital. She dressed softer, moved less rigidly, laughed more freely. Without the white coat, she seemed younger somehow, less armored. Mara noticed how she listened, truly listened, as if she were learning Mara from the ground up, determined not to assume anything again. "I'm still unlearning things," Rowan admitted one afternoon as they sat on a bench watching the water slide past. "Habits. Control." Mara smiled. "I'm relearning things. Trust. Honesty." Rowan glanced at her. "You're doing well." Mara tilted her head. "So are you." The compliment lingered between them, warm and unforced. Their first kiss came unexpectedly. Not at the end of a date. Not under some dramatic sky. They were in Mara's kitchen, cooking something simple that neither of them cared enough about to perfect. Rowan reached for salt at the same moment Mara reached for oil, their hands colliding softly. They froze. Rowan laughed quietly. "We're terrible at timing." Mara's heart pounded. "We're learning." Rowan looked at her then, really looked, and the moment shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with something unmistakable. "May I?" Rowan asked again, as she always did. Mara nodded. The kiss was gentle. Unhurried. A question rather than a declaration. When they pulled apart, Rowan rested her forehead briefly against Mara's, breathing her in. That felt right. Mara smiled through the ache in her chest. It does. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, Mara woke with pain that reminded her of how fragile her body still was. Other days, it was fear, quiet, persistent, that something would go wrong again. Rowan never tried to fix it. She learned when to hold, when to distract, when to simply sit beside Mara in silence. She didn't rush intimacy or treat Mara like someone made of glass. "You're allowed to take up space," Rowan told her once, when Mara apologized for needing to cancel plans. "Even on your bad days." Mara hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear that. They told their truths slowly. Rowan spoke of her marriage, how it had ended not in betrayal, but in exhaustion. Two people who loved each other but no longer knew how to be gentle. "I promised myself I wouldn't do that again," Rowan said quietly. "Lose myself in being what someone else needs." Mara squeezed her hand. "You don't have to." Rowan smiled. "I know." Mara shared more too, about loneliness, about how easily she disappeared into other versions of herself to survive. About the fear that being fully seen would mean being fully rejected. Rowan listened, eyes soft. "I see you," she said. "And I'm still here." One evening, months after their first meeting, they stood outside the hospital together. Rowan had finished a shift. Mara had come to walk her home. They paused beneath the glow of the streetlights, the building looming quietly behind them. "I used to think this place was where everything began," Mara said. "But now it feels like just the prologue." Rowan smiled. "I like that." She took Mara's hand. Not as doctor and patient. Not as rescuer and survivor. But as two women who had chosen each other, after fear, after honesty, after healing. And what grew between them wasn't fragile. It was rooted. Building a life together didn't feel dramatic. It felt intentional. Mara moved slowly at first, back into work, back into routines, back into a body that sometimes surprised her with pain and other times surprised her with strength. Rowan adjusted too, learning how to let her work remain important without letting it consume her. They learned each other in quiet ways. Rowan always made tea before bed, never coffee, no matter how late it was. Mara folded laundry methodically, as if order could soothe old anxieties. They argued gently, about music volume, about which way the bookshelves should face the light, and always circled back to laughter. The first time Mara stayed over at Rowan's flat, she woke before dawn and found Rowan already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, thoughtful. "Am I too much?" Rowan asked suddenly. Mara blinked. "What?" "This," Rowan said, gesturing vaguely. "Us. I don't want to overwhelm you." Mara smiled sleepily and reached for her hand. "You don't get to decide that for me either." Rowan laughed softly, relief evident. "Right. I keep forgetting." They learned how to navigate the shadow of how they met. Rowan avoided that wing of the hospital when she could. Mara learned which days were too hard to visit and which were grounding. They didn't pretend the past hadn't shaped them, but they refused to let it define them. Once, while walking through a quiet market, Mara paused suddenly. "I'm scared sometimes," she admitted. "That you'll always see me as someone you had to save." Rowan stopped walking. Turned to face her fully. "I don't see you that way at all." Mara searched her face. "Then how do you see me?" Rowan smiled. "As the woman who survived. Who chose honesty. Who chose me." Mara's eyes burned. "Good." They met each other's worlds slowly. Rowan met Mara's friends, awkward at first, then warmly welcomed once the tension dissolved. Mara met Rowan's colleagues carefully, introduced as "my partner," never as a former patient. The first time Rowan said the word out loud, partner, Mara felt something settle deep inside her chest. This is real, she thought. Time softened the scars. Mara's body healed more completely than she had dared to hope. Follow-up scans brought relief instead of dread. Rowan learned how to let joy exist without bracing for loss. They talked about the future. Not in sweeping declarations, but in practical, hopeful fragments. What if we moved somewhere with more light? Do you want a dog someday? Do you think love gets quieter, or deeper? Rowan kissed Mara's knuckles. Both, if you're lucky. One evening, months later, they returned to the river where they'd first sat together outside Crisis. Rowan stopped walking and turned to Mara, suddenly serious. I want to be clear, Rowan said. I don't want what we have to exist only because we survived something together. Mara nodded. It doesn't. Rowan smiled. Good. Because I want to keep choosing you. On the boring days too. Mara laughed, tears threatening. Especially then. They stood there, hands entwined, watching the water move steadily forward. They weren't the women they'd been when they first met. They were stronger. And what they were building wasn't born from rescue. It was born from choice. The first time Mara introduced herself to someone as Mara Ellison, without hesitation, she felt a small but profound shift inside. It wasn't dramatic. No one applauded. No one gasped. Just her voice, steady, owning the name she had hidden for so long. And Rowan, standing beside her, smiling with quiet pride, made it feel like the right moment in the universe to finally shed the mask. You're Mara, Rowan whispered softly after the introduction, her hand brushing Mara's back. And you've always been. Mara turned to her, eyes glistening. I'm glad you stayed. Rowan smiled, the kind that cradled her heart and made every worry about boundaries, lies, and mistakes shrink into nothing. I never left. They lived quietly after that, deliberately, savoring the ordinary moments that had once felt impossible, cooking meals together, bickering gently over music, walking in the park, or curling on the sofa with a book and no interruptions. Their relationship became less about survival and more about the mundane, the slow-blooming beauty of choice. Mara's body, once fragile and unpredictable, strengthened steadily. The memory of pain lingered, not as a shadow, but as a reminder of how much she had endured and survived. Rowan stayed at her side not out of duty but because she wanted to, because every day she chose Mara, and Mara chose her back. They began building a home together. Nothing extravagant. No grand declarations. Just a small apartment filled with light, books, photos, and laughter. Every corner of the space carried intention, the chair where Rowan always sat to read, the pillows Mara arranged in a pattern that made her smile, the kitchen counter littered with evidence of shared meals and half-finished recipes. And sometimes, when Rowan looked at Mara, her eyes softened the way they had in the hospital, before words, before lies, before names mattered. You know, Rowan said one evening as they watched the sun fade over the rooftops, I almost didn't stay. Not because of the surgery, but because I didn't know if you'd let me. Mara leaned into her. I'm glad I did. You made it easy, Rowan said, pressing her forehead to Mara's. You chose me anyway. Mara smiled against her. So did you. The world outside still moved fast, messy, and sometimes painful. But in their shared space, they had found steadiness. Months passed. Mara began to plan small adventures, weekend trips to the coast, quiet mornings in art galleries, evenings exploring tiny cafes tucked away from the world. Rowan accompanied her, learning her rhythms, sharing hers, discovering that love did not have to be a storm, it could be a calm sea, patient and deep. One night, long after the chaos of surgeries, hospital rooms, and whispered lies had faded, Rowan and Mara stood together on the balcony of their apartment, holding hands, watching the city lights flicker below. I've been thinking, Rowan said softly, about how fragile everything felt back then. How easy it would have been to let fear, yours or mine, keep us apart. Mara shook her head, smiling. We survived it. And we're here. Rowan brushed Mara's hair behind her ear. Here. Together. By choice. That's what matters. Mara kissed her then, slow, certain, a promise and a celebration. It wasn't about rescue. It wasn't about obligation. It was about love. The kind that waits, that endures, that grows stronger when you finally allow yourself to be fully seen. I'm Mara, she whispered. The name I should have kept all along. And I love Mara, Rowan replied, holding her close. And in that embrace, nothing else mattered. The past had its place, the scars had their lessons, but the future, bright, quiet, ordinary, and extraordinary all at once, was theirs to shape together. The apartment smelled of coffee and sunlight. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with novels they had collected together, some marked with notes in the margins, others with dog-eared pages that told stories of quiet afternoons spent reading side by side. Mara stirred a cup of tea while Rowan moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables for lunch. The small domestic rhythm, the soft clatter of utensils, the hum of the kettle, the occasional teasing comment, felt like its own kind of magic. Across the room, a small framed photograph caught Mara's eye. It was from a trip to the coast years ago, the waves curling in white, Rowan's hand clasped tightly in hers. She smiled. Thinking about the ocean again? Rowan asked, glancing up. Mara shook her head. Thinking about us. How far we've come. Rowan set down the knife and walked over, wrapping her arms around Mara from behind. It wasn't easy, she murmured into Mara's hair. But we chose each other anyway. Every day. Mara leaned back into her embrace. And we still do. The sound of laughter drifted from the hallway as their adopted daughter, little Lucy, ran past, a bright bundle of energy and curiosity, leaving a trail of art supplies behind her. Mara laughed softly. Rowan chuckled too, the sound warm and unhurried. They watched her go, hands still entwined. Mara thought of the hospital, the fear, the pain, the twisted ovary that had started it all. Back then, she had hidden herself behind a name that wasn't hers, afraid of rejection, afraid of being seen. Now, she was fully known, fully loved, and fully alive. Rowan pressed a kiss to her temple. I love you, Mara Ellison, she whispered. I love you, too, Mara replied, her voice steady, certain. And in the quiet of their home, among the echoes of their laughter and the soft rhythm of everyday life, they realized something profound. Love that survives fear, pain, and lies does not just endure, it flourishes. They had chosen each other once, and they would choose each other, every day, for the rest of their lives.